This is a personal testimony. The year was 1985. I had joined a particular church because I felt as though I needed some more mentoring. I had pastored a church between 1979 and 1984. The pastor had left them, and so therefore I volunteered to minister to them, oversee them temporarily until the church grew and filled up, and it did. And I left them simply because the Lord didn't speak to me about staying, and I felt as though I needed some more mentoring, and so I left them and ended up putting myself under another minister. Now, this particular church that I joined, and it was in actually somewhere the early part, well, the latter part of '84. But in '85, the pastor asked me to preach on a Wednesday night Bible study. Now, this basically was an all-white church. I was one of the first black male members. There was another young black girl that visited the church infrequently. As time went on, a lot of my friends joined the church later. And I'm saying this simply because I'm going to be dealing with some racial issues regarding church at another time. Well, anyway, Pastor asked me to minister, and I said okay. So I was at my job during break trying to come up with something to teach on. And the Lord spoke to me and said, preach on Mark 16. And I told the Lord, I can't preach on Mark 16. I mean, even though this church was basically what you call a charismatic church. So Mark 16 shouldn't have been a problem. But see, the problem is, though, on occasion I would hear the pastor say, Satan is defeated, constantly, Basically, what he was basically saying was that you don't have to really worry about the devil. Don't worry about him. He's already defeated. Well, see, there was a lot of error in there that I can't go into. And I knew it. So when the Lord spoke to me and said, preach on Mark 16, I knew that was a no-no. And that it would get the pastor upset. But anyway, I wrote out some things on Mark 16 that I thought, I don't need to preach on this, teach on this. So I tried to come up with another sermon. But God would not allow me. It's like he blanked out my mind. I couldn't think of anything but Mark 16. I tried my best to come up with another sermon and I couldn't. And the Lord gave me a vision. And in this vision, I was at my desk and I saw myself teaching on Mark 16. And I realized, what's the use? Your arms are too short to box with God. So anyway, that Wednesday night, went to the church, the cameras were set up. And I thought, oh my goodness, they are going to tape this teaching. Pastor introduced me, I got up and taught. Mark 16, 17, these signs shall follow them that believe in my name. They should cast out devils and they should speak with new tongues, whatever. So as I was teaching, within about 15 minutes, one elderly gentleman with his, daughter or granddaughter, got up and walked out. And I looked at the pastor. I was teaching, and the pastor didn't change the expression. And I looked at one of the elders' wives. She was right at the edge of her chair, listening very intently. And I was so nervous during that night that I punctuated a lot of my sayings with, you know. Anyway, I finished teaching, closed up my Bible, and as soon as I finished teaching, 90%, it had to be at least 90% of the people got up and clapped, which was very shocking to me. So after everything settled down, they sat down and the pastor got up. And one of the first things that came out of his mouth was these words: there will be no division in this church. I knew I was in trouble. So anyway, he said a few more things and he dismissed. But as I got up to leave, I had crowds of people surrounding me, asking me questions regarding spiritual warfare and body ministry. And I did my best to try to answer their question. I mean, just groups of, I would talk to one group of people and another group of people would come up and ask me questions, then another group of people. I made my way toward the vestibule, of the church. I mean, I had just different groups of people asking me questions. It had to be maybe about 30 minutes before I was able to leave the church. Well, anyway, I finally left and I went home. And I realized that I came to the conclusion that there was going to be a sermon waiting on me next Sunday. But anyway, I had a camp meeting to go to. So if I went to this camp meeting Sunday, I wouldn't be back until Sunday after next. So maybe he would have cooled down about that time. So I went to the camp meeting and I came back Sunday after next. Came to church. The pastor got up to preach a sermon. And the name of that sermon was Cleansing the Temple. That sermon was for me. Since I didn't come to church the next Sunday, he waited on me and preached it Sunday after next. And the reason I know it was for me because some of the things he was saying, some of the church folks would look back at me to see how I was responding. So anyway, went to church the next Sunday. He preached on Cleansing the Temple, Part 2. I had 2 sermons preached on me. Now these sermons wasn't so much as to say you need to leave the church. It really wasn't. I guess he was just trying to say that, Brother Glover, you need some more cleansing. I'm just being nice. Oh, I got the tapes too. This is Cleansing the Temple Part 1. And this is Cleansing the Temple Part 2. I kept them for reference. Also, now another thing too is that I was never asked to minister again by my pastor. That was in April of 85 when I ministered that. Now I didn't leave until the summer of 87. I ministered in homes and the church that I had overseen, I could minister there. But I was never asked to minister again by my pastor. Now eventually actually it wasn't no more than 6 months later, well actually maybe about a year later, he opened up himself for Doctrines of Demons. An evangelist or teacher came through teaching some deep revelations regarding the word. And this minister would state that he would pray in the spirit for hours over one verse. And he could make one verse seem alive and exciting. And we normally had more people when this evangelist teacher came than normal. So this pastor was impressed by this minister. So he came up with a shortcut. The pastor stated that you don't have to be praying in the spirit all that time to get something from the Lord. All you got to do is just tune into the spirit, because he said that God is talking all the time. So all you got to do is just tune in to the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit will give you things. But he didn't realize he was tuning in to demon spirits. So he came up with this concept called soul and spirit, which is really witchcraft. Teaching that since you are born again, your spirit is born again, your soul should be submitted to your spirit. Actually, your spirit, soul, and body should be submitted to the Holy Spirit. He preached God was the spirit, Jesus was the soul. Paul was the spirit, Timothy was the soul. The husband is the spirit, the wife is the soul. Everything in the Bible was centered around the concept of soul and spirit. And that doctrine is still taught in a lot of churches. Anyway, I left in the summer of 87. Some years later, this pastor backslid and went into the world. Just like Peter said in Acts, it is better to obey God rather than man. God bless.